All right. Welcome to your real estate podcast. I believe this is episode number 13, and we are going to address real estate agents. And I think the stat is now 87% of real estate agents fail. If you're not an agent, you can stick around. There are a lot of things we talk about here that may be essential for your business or personal growth and development. But 87% of agents fail in this industry, especially in the first 5 years. And there's a reason why. And we're just going to touch on these bullet points as to why this happens, right? So if you're a new agent, this is ideal for you. You're just getting into real estate. Congratulations, you passed your exam. What you learned in class is not going to translate in the real world, right? So we're going to talk about what translates, what's going to make you successful, and be, part of the 13% that actually survives the real estate industry after 5 years. Anyway, if you're an old agent and things are not going the way you planned, or you just feel like you need an extra spark, stick around. This will also help you hone in on your skills and sharpen your tools, right? Especially as we're going into the new year. Let's get it going. I would say the number one reason why agents fail is lack of consistency in lead generation and prospecting, right? Because this is it's not like a retail store where you open it and then customers just come in and purchase stuff, right? Here, you got to generate, you eat what you kill, as a hunter-gatherer, right? You got to generate leads and you got to prospect. And you need a strategy on how to go about that. You know, you can check out my previous episode on business plan. We're not going to get into that, but whatever your lead generation strategy is, you need to be consistent at it, right? So a lot of agents are inconsistent, and this inconsistency causes a lot of agents to fail. They may start off at one point, a lot of zeal and fire, move on for a little bit, but then the enthusiasm fails off, especially when they go through trials or they go through things that may, make life a little hard for them. They just throw in the towel. So lack of consistent lead generation and prospecting is the number one reason why agents fail. Well, actually, this is not in any particular order. Just one of the reasons, all right? Treating real estate like it's a hobby instead of a business. I was guilty of this in my initial years of doing real estate, especially being that I had a full-time job. You just treat it like, I can do without it today. If I don't feel like it, I don't do it today, So that's almost a hobby. If you don't feel like playing golf today, you don't go play golf. You don't feel like going to the basketball court today, you don't do it. You don't feel like watching a movie today, you don't do it. That's a hobby. But a job or a business is like, if I don't wake up and go to work, I may get fired. Do you treat real estate as such? So I had to just change my mindset, right? And I would say one of the big reasons why is because even in my job, I was a manager already, and it's a business, that I used to manage. So it kind of helped me just get a mindset of how these businesses run, the daily KPIs and tasks and requirement, and it opens at a certain time. If you don't open your door at a certain time, you get clients calling the corporate office, right? Why don't you treat your business as such? And that's what hit me. I'm like, treat your business like the business where you go work, where you have to open at a certain time, close at a certain time, be a professional. Obviously, people call off, even in jobs. That's why they give you paid time off, sick leave, vacation hours. These things happen. But for the most part, Stop treating your real estate business as though it was a hobby, right? Look at these retail stores or the doctor's office, the dentist office. Go set an appointment with a dental office right now and set it for next month and see how many times they send you a text message to confirm your appointment, or even a doctor's office. Go set an appointment with them and see how many times they text you to confirm your appointment and then send you reminders. Do you do that for your clients when you set up a showing? Do you text them and follow up and say, hey, I want to confirm our showing? Are you going to be there? Do you do that for your listing appointments? You treat real estate as though it's a hobby and not a business. And that's why most agents fail. So no daily schedule or structured routine. And once again, this goes back to treating it like a hobby. Because when it's a job, you have a schedule. Like, okay, at this time I clock in, at this time I clock out. Treat it as such. You are a business, You have to treat it as such. Structured routine. I think it's Jay-Z that said, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. Like, he's a business entity himself. So you got to treat your life as such, as though it's your career, as though it's a business. You have to structure it. A daily schedule, like today I clock in at this time, I clock off here. A structured routine. So yes, things happen. As I mentioned, even in the business or job, you got personal sick time where you got to call out. You may have a family emergency. These things are allocated and by a company. But for the most part, once that day off is gone, you go back to your routine. The same should happen in your real estate business. You got to have a structure, right? Daily schedule and a structure routine. And most agents lack that. They just go to the office and they wing it. Whatever happens, happens. And there's no structure in how they go about running their business. They don't have any plan or strategy on how they go about it. They just, whatever happens, happens. And that's just not the right way to go about things, right? Another reason why most real estate agents fail is failure to track KPIs, calls, appointments, contracts, and closings. So KPIs are like key performance indicators, which are ways you measure how you're doing. So am I calling these people? Am I setting these appointments? Am I doing these contracts? Just your key performance indicators. So the failure to track these things is what causes agents to not succeed in the business. Because, okay, you want to sell 20 houses. Maybe you should set a quota on how many calls you should make. As I mentioned, my 9 to 5 was being a manager, right? There's an annual plan. When you wake up, like when the year starts, we get the fiscal year is not actually January to January there. It's another month. But when that month starts, we get an annual projected sales forecast, numbers that we got to hit, right? So the same goes to your real estate career. What's my number? What's my projected forecast? Am I going to be over or under? And then in order to accomplish that, we have different columns that we need to hit, different matrix that we need to hit, right? Like they may have a quarter. If you do this, it would help generate this X amount of sales. This task would help. So projected tasks, and they track it on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and by half, 6 months, then annually. That's how a business is run, But you have a sale goal as a real estate agent, and you don't know how many calls you need to make that would help you get to that sale number, right? How many appointments do you need to set? How many homes do you need to put under contract in order to give you closing? And then each closing, how much do you estimate your commission check would be? You know, so they don't track it. And the reason why you got to track it is to see what is working. And if something is working, it's say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So if it's working, you double down on it. And sometimes you got to do addition by subtraction. Most agents wake up and they're busy from start to finish, but most of what they do are not revenue generating activities, right? So you're doing a lot, but it's not making you any money. You're wasting a lot of time. You go to the office, you answer emails, you make coffee, you sit there in a meeting, you sit there and talk to this person and that person, you talk to your broker, you do a business plan, then you go home, you say, wow, I was at the office all day. You accomplished nothing. Busy work, you know? So what you need to do is you need to change that from just general busy activities and trim the fat. Look at all, there's a book called The One Thing, right? The One Thing. It's like it's really trying to focus on the one thing that you can do that will give you all these, that can make every other task irrelevant. You know, just that, you know, chase the big rocks, in essence, is what I'm saying. This thing right here, can your business live without it? And you get to find out that these other tasks you're doing are just a waste of time. So focus on what works. That's why you got to track your KPIs. If it works, you double down on it. You know, they may call you a one-trick pony, but when you think about it, think about star athletes, right? When you watch their highlights, their career highlights, you see a pattern in just a signature move. Every star athlete in different sports, you know, they may know some are versatile, but they have a signature move. Their go-to when the going gets tough, when they got to get a point, a bucket, whatever it may be, they have their signature move, right? So that's why you track your numbers, you track your activities, then you want to see what's your signature move, then you get good at it. And what's not working, you readjust. You know, the dinosaur goes extinct, right? So if you're not able to adapt, you die. So if something is not working, you change, right? Poor follow-up with leads and past clients. So one more thing is, on a personal note, this is something I struggled with, not the past client part. I've actually been very decent at following up with past clients to the point where I've gotten multiple repeat customers, references. They'll suggest people to me. But poor follow-up on leads was something that I struggled with. You know, you would have a gentleman or lady that is interested in possibly selling 6 months down the line, and I didn't follow up on a constant basis. Then when the 6-month time comes, you reach out to them, you are almost a stranger that they never spoke to before. But if you would have kept on engaging, following up, when the time comes for them to make a move, they would know you, like, you're first to mind, in essence, is all I'm saying. Be first to mind. So when people want to do business in real estate, they think of you first, right? But when you don't follow up, you become an afterthought, right? Or there's a property you're engaged with this seller, then you look online and the house is on the market. They didn't even reach out to you because you didn't follow up, right? So poor follow up. So that's something that causes a lot of agents to fail. They lose a lot of money. And one thing I've done to get better at that is I don't write it down on a piece of paper anymore when it comes to follow up. I do that, but I also put it in my CRM, but I set reminders, you know, on my cell phone especially, that I hold all the time. So and I set alarms, maybe a day before alarm and a reminder on the 30 minutes before the activity. So if I'm supposed to follow up with this lady today or in 7 days, on the 6th day, her name will pop up on my phone, and then the day of, maybe 2 hours prior to the time I set, it will pop up again. So I can't trust my memory anymore. You trust, the technology to kind of remind you. So that's just by the way, something you can implement that would help you. Inconsistent marketing or relying on only one source of lead. That kind of is something I've seen. When one thing is working, you want to double down on it. I did say that initially, and we're sticking with that. But what we're saying here is, diversify. You don't want to be a jack of all trades, chasing too many different lead sources. I had to trim the fat myself. I'm only going after like 3 different lead sources, but you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket for your real estate business, right? Think about different lead sources, maybe 3 maximum for me. You may be able to do 4, but you don't want to be all over the place, So don't be relying on one lead source, but don't be stretched too thin as well. At the same time, you just want enough lead sources to where you can consistently market those. When you become stretched too thin, you find out you're doing so much and you're not consistent in 1 or 2 things or 2 areas, right? So inconsistent marketing or relying on only one lead source is another reason why agents fail. Weak communication and negotiation skills, right? Weak communication can come from you just not knowing how to approach people, not knowing how to read body language. Sometimes people go to a showing and they're trying to sell the customer, something, but you're not able to read that they're not interested in that. That's all weak communication. You should be able to gauge and read the room, right? That's part of being a strong communicator. And obviously negotiation is just knowing what's an offer that would entice somebody, when to walk away, things of that nature, Another reason why agents fail is fear of rejection and avoidance of difficult conversation. So this goes to why there's a lack of consistency in lead generation. It's fear of rejection. Most people are like, oh, if I call them, they're going to tell me no. Oh, I don't like when people say no. Oh, I don't like being yelled at. I don't like when they hang the phone up. Just think of it, you don't know these people. That call is going to be so quick or whatever it may be. You're just afraid to have a difficult conversation. So let's say, for instance, a seller is overpricing their house. Are you able to tell them, I don't think it's going to sell at this price? And even if you want to take the listing, put a contingency in which if it doesn't sell or you don't get enough showings or viewings in about 40 days, not 40 days, that's a long time. In about 14 days, 2 weeks, you need to revisit that listing, But if the seller's not willing to do that, are you okay with walking away? That's where you stand on your professional judgment and you say, I don't believe this is going to work, So just fear of rejection. They don't prospect because they're afraid of being told no. And also they avoid difficult conversations. That's a big reason why agents fail. Right? No clear value proposition to differentiate them from other agents. So there's a value proposition. Some people got a slogan. If you look at these businesses, they have a value proposition, which is just what you do better than the others. You need to know that. You need to be able to tap into that. It's like if you a ride in the elevator with the CEO of your company, and another manager gets to ride the elevator with that CEO, just that, would you be in the elevator and there's an awkward silence, or do you have a quick value proposition, something you can go to, right? That can make that CEO remember you as a manager, a low-level manager in the building, or you're just going to have that awkward silence. It's the same with the CEO in this case now are your clients, your customers. When you do interact with them, are you just going to have that awkward silence to where, you're just one of many agents that interviewed, or you're going to have that spark? That's the value proposition, something you bring to the table that stands out. You don't fit in, you stand out, and it brings that to mind and resonates with the client. So when you're gone, because most of the time this sellers or sometimes even buyers will interview multiple agents. So you need that value proposition that would, make you stand out and make them want to do business with you, right? Inadequate pricing and market knowledge. Inadequate pricing. So when people price homes for sale, sometimes, like I mentioned, you as the listing agent, you need to be able to stand on what you believe is the right price. You overprice houses sometimes. The first 2 weeks are like pivotal weeks in getting the house sold. And if you don't price it in a proper manner, you may not get that listing sold. The same goes if you're trying to submit an offer, especially in a competitive market. If you don't price the house properly or advise your client to make the proper offer, you're not going to be able to get these deals, right? So inadequate pricing and market knowledge is one. Another reason why agents fail. One more we're going to talk about is overestimating income and underestimating expenses. One thing I found out for me, I just did my business plan yesterday or earlier today. I had actually structured it, but I actually wrote down numbers now, right? And I underestimated deliberately. I underestimated income, overestimated expenses, and it's not estimate, but the requirement of tasks I need to do, I allocated more time to the big tasks, right? But I underestimated, some people may say overestimate, so if you fall short, you're in a good place. I think I went that route a few years ago, and I don't see that to be beneficial. I would rather underestimate and then come up way higher by doing more, So people go into the real estate industry and they overestimate, I'm going to make $1 million this year. And they fail to they fail to account for their expenses, their monthly fees, their office dues, the advertising, gas and all these different fees they got to pay. They don't account for those, but yet they account for all types of income. And then the light bulbs hit them, the light hits them. The light bulb goes off. They don't get the sales they were projecting, but yet they're spending all this money. Now they got to get a job to pay their bills, right? Because nobody wants to be in an area where they're just spending and not making money. So I think people overestimate their income, they underestimate expenses, and then they find themselves out of the real estate industry. Another reason why some agents fail is just poor financial management and cash flow planning. I think who's going viral? Was it Odell Beckham Jr. is going viral about his $100 million lifestyle and how that's not enough to maintain a lifestyle, and we see a lot of retired athletes failing. The same is true in the real estate industry because the checks come few, I wouldn't say few and far between, but sometimes if you get in the flow of things, you can have a commission check every month, multiple commission checks every month. I've seen both, but then I've also seen multiple months go by when I don't get a transaction, right? So what some agents do is they get a commission check and they go spending it as though that is their average. So let's say you make a $20,000 commission check on this transaction, but every other transaction you've done is only giving you $7,000. Don't go live as though $20,000 is your average, salary. You want to live as though you are in the $7,000 average, And then you got to account for months when you don't get a deal, so that even brings your average a little lower. So I think just inadequate financial management and planning. Let's say you average one deal every 2 months, but you get your commission check and you blow it all in 1 month. Now you still got these monthly dues your broker requires, and you don't have the money to pay. Now you got to get out of the business, right? So just failure to plan accurately and not accounting for the cash flow. Another reason why agents fail is failure to build relationships and a referral-based business. So I can say the end of this year, really, it's the referrals that sustained me, right? When I first got into it, I did a lot of paid leads. I actually think that is a business model that works. I've even thought about probably doing that again. It did work. I got almost 10 or 12 transactions 1 year from buying leads, just from one lead source, actually. So that is a business model. You can sustain things, but you're just going to spend a lot. So your take home is a lot less when you think about it. But this year, actually, just to give a little story, early in the year, things were just like slow, right? Things were going, but you can just tell you're spending a lot on trying to buy leads, but none of them are translating. And then you just know, okay, this is not me. You're hearing it and you're seeing so many other signs that the market is changing. So you just say, you know what? Let me stop wasting this money on ads. And then you're still able to close deals and you see, oh, these are referrals from people I dealt with before. And there are some agents who have 100% referral-based business. That is a business model. So when you build relationships to where some people build business-to-business relationships with tax accountants. So these accountants now refer them to their clients. When the client say, oh, I want to buy a house, the tax accountant may say, oh, I have an agent that I can recommend. I would say another one is like lawyers, divorce lawyers, when people are going through divorces and they got to sell a house, that's another lead source where certain agents got that lawyer to always recommend them first, right? Another area that causes agents to fail is not investing in training, coaching, or skill development. Coaching can be very, very expensive, and sometimes you got to be wary of some of these coaches, right? They say those that can't do it, coach it, because when you look at the greatest players, they're not always the greatest coaches. And there's a reason why most of the greatest coaches, they were subpar in their playing career, right? And some people say it's because as a player, when you're very great, your expectation or patience is your expectation is high and your patience is at a minimum, right? So these are things to keep in mind. Some of these coaches, you know, they talk a good game, but have they done it? You don't know. So I get the apprehension as to I don't know about this coach right here. I don't know about paying for this skill right here. I don't know about paying for that. Anyway, I will say this much. Not working on your skill or being training yourself, however you want to go about it. Some coaching is really not for the coaching, it's for the community they can give you, right? When you got like-minded individuals holding you accountable, that can help, you know, a mastermind group that can come up with different strategies on how to enhance just the workflow, right? Or if you don't feel like doing that, take it upon yourself to learn a new skill of your trade, you know. Training, you know. We talk about training. We talked about professional sports. Like, let's say they play on Sundays, right? On football, when you think about football, but they practice all week. Because of the physical nature, they only play one game a week. But the less physical sports, they may play multiple games a week, like the baseballs and basketballs. But they still have training sessions. They have an entire off season where they train, right? So that training right there is very pivotal. And how much do you train in your craft as an agent, right? Most agents fail to train, so they want to talk to clients and they lose sight of the words. So, for instance, you're prospecting. For anybody who does prospecting, cold calling, you're calling and sometimes the phone is ringing for 10, 15 minutes, nobody's picking up. And then all of a sudden somebody picks up, then you stumble through your words because you're not practicing your scripts, what to say, you know. So you wasted all that time sitting there trying to get somebody on the phone. They got on the phone and you blew yourself out of the deal because you don't know what to say. You didn't practice your skill, right? So a lot of agents don't practice this, you know, a listing presentation. They don't practice how to present, their value proposition, you know, to the client. So when they do get in front of the client, they still lose out on the deal because of lack of training, you know, and skill development. You know, there are different skills. How to show a house, you know, there's a skill in that, a skill set in that. You know, for instance, if you're with a married couple, you know, and you're a guy, would you be, not even a married couple, just a female, you know, would you be like right underneath the female client as she climbs up the steps? And let's say she's to turn around, it looks like your face is right up her, you know, looking where it shouldn't be. So there's a skill to that. Maybe you go upstairs first. Maybe you wait till she gets upstairs. Or what if you're going with a married couple and the husband turns around and it looks like you're looking up his wife's, you know, rear end. So there's a skill on staging a property, you know, negotiating. So just different things, or even being secure, like when you're showing a house as a lady or a woman, even a man, going into a basement of a big house with somebody and you're cornered, you know. So all these things, are you texting somebody, a friend, somebody at your office, letting them know where you're going to go show a property? So you're not training yourself for success, you know. So there are a lot of reasons that people just glance over that could be even life-threatening or even the reason why you succeed or fail, right? Trying to do everything alone instead of leveraging systems or support. So if you don't have the money, you got to be a jack of all trades when you first start. But as things start to pick up, you need to start leveraging systems just to free you. You know, you get people or systems, you automate things, you know, especially with the AI going on. You know, you can get the AI to speed things up, you know, processes, CMAs, just apps. You know, for instance, tracking receipts, right? The QuickBook app can just streamline all of that to where you don't have to manually write things. Calendar, I talked about. I used to write these things down, right? And then I would miss a date, then I see the paper like, oh man, I was supposed to call this lady a week ago. But now you use the technology to remind you. Excuse me. Emails, right? You know, you can send these emails one at a time, but then you have these like bomb that just send all these video emails out at once to a bunch of people. So you just got to streamline these things, leverage systems or support, hire an admin. But if you can't afford one, you got other options that you can go with, right? In order to make things and make your life easier. And I think a lot of agents don't take advantage of these things. Another thing is lack of accountability or mentorship. So either you hold yourself accountable or you have a mentor. And the thing about it is this. People have accountability partners, but they don't hold each other accountable, right? Either they're afraid or whatever. You really need somebody that's going to be able to hold you accountable. And you know, even sometimes your broker, they may give you advice, but will they really hold you accountable? Would they fine you? Would they terminate you or your contract with them? Most of them probably won't, you know. But if you really want to succeed, you need a real accountability partner. And one way you can do that is put your money where your mouth is. You know, you can write a check for $1,000 and give it to somebody in your mentor, for instance, or your accountability partner. And if you fail to do what you say you're going to do, you give them the right to cash that check. You write it to them, but they can't cash it until, you know, maybe the end of the week or the month when you guys do your numbers, you know. And you actually know that if I don't do what I'm supposed to, I may lose $1,000. So somebody that's actually willing to hold you accountable for what you're supposed to do. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you pay up, right? And also another way to be accountable is you know, people do group video sessions to where they are prospecting like in a Zoom call together, and you see each other doing what they're supposed to do. That's why if you work at a call center, you have managers that can listen in on your calls. One, for training purposes, but second, to make sure you're actually doing the prospecting, right? So lack of accountability, and most agents come into this industry because they don't want to be held accountable on the job. So they find it hard that when they do come here, they're being held accountable again, which are the wrong reasons, right? But those who are coachable, trainable, and don't mind accountability, don't mind advice from a mentor, are those that tend to succeed, right? Another reason why agents fail, they give up too quickly. Say giving up too quickly during slow markets or setbacks. So not all activity. You may do all the right activity, but it may just not translate into a sale. You know, I've had years when I did almost the same thing and one year paid off more than the other. You know, the market may not be in the most favorable conditions. And sometimes it takes things to build up when you talk about a pipeline. Pipeline sometimes takes some time to build up. So I would say give yourself 3 to 6 months before you evaluate your pipeline and see how things are going. And don't just throw in the towel after a few tries. You try something for a little bit, it doesn't work, you throw it away. You try another thing, you throw it away, right? Give yourself some time to actually see it through. You don't want to wait too long though, especially if it's an expensive lead generating source. You want to be able to pivot from that. That's why most of these lead sources will tell you we require a 6 month commitment, an annual commitment. So there's a plus side to that, but there's also a business strategy with that. For them, they want that income to be locked in for 6 months. You know, they want that income to be locked in for a year. But also some of them do that because they know you need at least 6 months to see results. You need at least a year to kind of get in the flow of things, right? So they don't want you to do 1 or 2 months, you don't see results, you throw in the towel. Oh, this ad system here doesn't work, right? Most of them require some time and some commitment. Just keep that in mind. Another reason why agents fail is not adapting to market shifts, technology, or consumer behavior. You know, market shifts, technology. So right now, market shifts, you got to know the market environment. We were in a seller's market for the past 2 years. If you're an agent now, you jump in it, you list in a property, and you advise your seller as though, you know, we're still in the seller's market. You overpriced the house. Now you're in for a rude awakening, right? Things have shifted. Now it's more so leaning towards a buyer's market. So you not being able to know the market has shifted, not being able to adapt to the technology that's out there. You know, AI is a big thing right now. And there are different ways it's helping to enhance the real estate industry. And you got agents who just say, oh, I hate AI, you know, and you just say, okay, you don't wish that on them, but will they be in business 5 years from now? The more automated things get, you know. So remember, if you want to be a dinosaur, you'll be extinct, right? There's evolution and growth. So you want to be able to always adapt. And also consumer behavior is something that you got to know, you know, especially market trends. Those are things that speak to consumer behavior, you know. So you need to be able to read the room, the financial room in essence. One more reason we can talk about is chasing the shiny object instead of mastering fundamentals. And we kind of talked about this as far as going after so many different lead sources, right? You sit down, you watch on YouTube, an agent says, oh, I sold 100 houses by doing this, and then you jump on that. You give yourself a week of doing that, it didn't work. You go back on Instagram, somebody says, oh, I post on TikTok and it gives me a lot of sales. You jump on TikTok. You know? Another one says, oh, I knock doors in this neighborhood and it gives me a lot of sales. You go knocking doors. And nothing happens, you know? So you're chasing the shiny object. It's the shiny object syndrome, right? And I think you need to be able to break away from that. And you need to master fundamentals, you know, master the basics. You know, mastery they say comes from 1,000 hours of repetitive work, right? For 1,000 hours, you've been doing this thing for 1,000 hours. And we talked about the surnames of British people, right? When you hear a butler, you hear somebody called Butler or somebody called Smith, or you hear somebody called a baker, that was derived from the craft they were in. Some people were bakers. You hear Fisher, you hear these last names from the British people. It came from the craft they and their family or friends, whatever, were in. And that's how the last name came about. A Smith was like maybe a goldsmith, or a blacksmith, right? So, and it took, this is before the standard, form of education where people go to school now. That form of education really just came about during the industrial age. You got to keep in mind, before the Industrial Revolution, schools were not a thing. Schools became a thing when every parent had to go work. And they just needed a place to put the kids. So they started creating these schools. You understand? There were training centers, even back since the Greek and Roman period, right? You have training centers. But for the most part, before the Industrial Revolution, even in London, to learn a skill, you go be an apprentice. So you shadow a master, meaning this person is a master in their craft. They'll say a master goldsmith, a master blacksmith, a master baker, a master butcher, because they have done that for over 1,000 hours. Talking about practice, right? The famous Allen Iverson thing, right? Practice. And then, we're talking about practice. But anyway, yes, we are talking about practice. Shadowing that master, that person that has done this thing for over 1,000 hours, right? And instead of chasing a shiny object, you become a master at your craft. You've done this thing now for over 1,000 hours, repetitive nature. Muscle memory, right? So why do basketball players say, oh, I shoot 1,000 shots a day? It's just muscle memory. You need to develop that, right? So you are a professional. They say professional. Amateur basketball players don't go shooting 1,000 shots a day. Well, some do if they're trying to make it to the pros. But even the pros, when they've arrived, they do that in order to sharpen their skills. How come you are now claiming to be a professional, but you're not doing what it takes to master your fundamentals, right? Finally, we talk about burnout from poor time management and work-life balance. So that's why I always say, even in my 7-point business plan that I talked about in the other podcast episode, one of the points was give yourself some grace. You're a human. Don't use that grace as an excuse to be a slacker, to always be slacking off. But you need to be graceful to yourself. Like, even the Pomodoro technique, right? When it's time to prospect, nobody, unless a superhuman, is going to be able to prospect for 4 hours straight. So one of the ways people used to motivate and keep themselves alert is like, you go for 25 minutes, you break for 5. You go for 35, you break for 7. However you want to split it. That keeps you honest, keep you going. Because you don't want to burn out. If you keep getting rejected all for 4 hours, who does that? You get tired. So you go 25 break, 25 break, Same goes with your life in real estate. You go for a week, a month. Sometimes be okay on yourself, be easy on yourself, and then take a break. Treat yourself. Sometimes you reward your behavior, You feel as though if I made all my prospecting calls I'll buy myself this little thing. I'll go to a particular restaurant, whatever it may be. So those are just things you can keep in mind. And as to why agents fail. Just a few more, what can we say, bonus points right here. You can talk about the myth of passive income. That's why agents fail, because when they see, oh, I'm a real estate agent, they think it's passive income. It's they can just sit down and the houses will sell themselves. People will come to them and say, hey, I want to sell my house, put my house on the market. So they got this idea of it being passive, like they don't have to do anything, and the income just flows. So it's a myth. It's really a full-time business, Yet and still, you don't want to go from a job and be a glorified employee in a real estate environment. That's why we talk about leveraging other people, like personal assistant and things of the transaction coordinators, or even automation. So anyway, the myth of passive income, people get disappointed when they jump in and they find out they got to do work. I know a bunch of lazy people that jump into real estate thinking this is going to solve their problem. And I just laugh, like, really, if they know I work even harder here sometimes than, Anyway, it's not a passive income thing. You're very much actively involved and engaged. Another one would be a financial trap. Understanding the hidden costs, licensing fees, marketing, we touched on that. Just people having a low financial runway. It derails most careers. They got all these fees before they get going. They've ran out of the little money they had saved, and now they got to quit, right? The accountability crisis, we talked about that. Accountability tips I'll give you is our practice, steps you can take today to shift your trajectory. Whether you're a brand new real estate agent or a struggling agent looking to reset your business, there are trainings you can take that can get rid of some of these mistakes. Lack of consistent lead generation, poor time management, weak follow-up system, no business plan, misunderstanding income producing activities. Misunderstanding income generating activities, we talked about it. You go to the office and you're having a long conversation with your broker. Then you go on lunch, you come back, you check a million emails, then you watch 5 training videos, and you go home and you say, oh, I was at the office for 8 hours. None of those are income generating activities. So you just wasted the day. Most agents don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they lack structure, systems, and accountability. So, working busy is not the same as working productively. And most agents fail to realize that. And a lot of agents, they feel so burnt out, but yet they're not making any revenue. They're very busy, but they're not productive. Like I said, one thing I did for the new year coming up is to trim the fat. Cut off a lot of activities that don't generate any income. Not developing me, not creating income. Why am I doing this, right? Just sharpen the skills and focus on revenue generating activities. The mindset of consistency matter more than motivation. People watch these motivational speakers. Yeah, they serve a purpose, Every once in a while, if you're down in the dumps and you need something to motivate you, here's the problem. Don't let the motivation drive you. You don't want the motivation to create action. That is not sustainable. You want your action to create motivation. And here, let me explain that. It's like, so when you start doing something, now you get motivated to do it, to finish it, to see it through. You feel better, If you start cleaning, you just find out you only wanted to dust one table. Now you've cleaned your entire kitchen. Now you cleaned your entire house. Your actions motivate your behavior and not the other way around, So you got to build systems early that will just eradicate this dependency on how you feel. That's what motivating is. It's like, if I don't feel motivated today, I don't go. The top performers go whether or not they feel motivated, Actionable strategies to survive and thrive beyond 5 years. You just got to have these things listed. Well, I hope, and one thing I'll say, you always want to write down your kryptonite, right? The things that cause you to fail, the things that cause you to procrastinate, Write them down, because knowing the enemy, you can spot it, you can see it happen, and you can know how to tackle it. But just to recap, we got lack of consistent lead generation and prospecting, treating real estate like a hobby instead of a business, no daily schedule or structured routine, failure to track KPIs, which are key performance indicators such as calls, appointments, contracts, closings, poor follow-up with leads and past clients, inconsistent marketing or relying on only one lead source, weak communication and negotiation skills, fear of rejection and avoidance of difficult conversation. And these are all just reasons why agents fail. We got another one: no clear value proposition to differentiate themselves from other agents, inadequate pricing and marketing knowledge, inadequate pricing and market knowledge, right? Overestimating income and underestimating expenses. Agents fail because of poor planning, poor financial management, poor financial planning, and cash flow planning, Some agents fail, to build relationships and create a referral-based business. So they constantly on a hamster wheel trying to chase their next deal because they didn't build a referral-based business. Some agents fail by not investing in training, coaching, or skill development. Some fail because they're not trying to do everything. They're trying to do everything alone instead of leveraging systems or supports. Some fail because of lack of accountability or mentorship. Another one is giving up too quickly during slow markets or setbacks. Another one is not adapting to market shifts, technology, or consumer behavior. Another one is chasing the shiny objects instead of mastering fundamentals. Jack of all trades rather than a master of one or a few. Finally, burnout or poor time management and work-life balance. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of why 87% of real estate agents fail within the first year. All right. And we shall wrap it up right there. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe.
Your ultimate hub for real estate insights, breaking news, entrepreneurial wisdom, investing strategies, and self-development hacks. If you're ready to expand your mind and stay ahead of the game floor, you're in the right place. Subscribe now. Your future self will thank you.